trade deadline obviously has come and gone. The Hawks didn't make any moves. But there has been no player talked about in trade capacities more since the trade deadline than Trae Young.
Yeah.
And Mark Stein at his Substack wrote a story about this the other day. This is the line that caught my eye more than any other in this piece. Quote, I can tell you this much. They've certainly convinced various rival teams that a Dejounte Murray in a Trae out course is going to be legitimately considered. The Hawks, to be clear, have not made a firm decision yet. This isn't the time to lock into such a lane with 29 games left in Atlanta's season and a trip to the plane run at the very least more than within reach. How the rest of the season plays out is absolutely going to factor into those steps. So, Brendon,
yep.
What do you make of this? What do you make of the idea that Trae Young is already perhaps being like soft launch as the next name brand player on the move?
It only surprises me because of the context with Murray. Because you might have various levels of how much you like Dejounte Murray. People have debated whether he can return to his defensive form as a good point of attack guy and steal guy in the past, or if he can't, is the three-point shooting from this season real or not real? Is he a great passer or kind of just a mediocre or good passer? There's all sorts of... He's a debated player. He's not a franchise player. So I know it's only written that way by Mark Stein just because we all thought Murray would get traded, so it's just sort of comparing them in that capacity. But from a Hawks standpoint, and this might be part of why they're floating it, but you have to be pretty damn positive that you are getting a foundational organization reset type of package for Trae Young. I think we can talk through the teams that Mark Stein listed out and discuss whether they would get that from these teams. But honestly, where I fall in between maybe those two sides of it would just be, unless it was like an Anthony Davis level package, Chris, I would probably walk away forecasting out to a potential trade actually happening this offseason. And I put myself in that mindset based on what we know now. I would probably feel like it happened because the Hawks were being cheap more than anything else. It's not fun to pay somebody $50 million when you're mediocre. That doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Yeah, and look, Trae, for all of the warts, I like that. That is a very named star player. Like, he has been since college. Like, he's someone that people know. Now, has that changed over the last couple of years? We've talked about this a little bit. I think it has. It feels like it has in the broader discourse. But he's still a really, really talented player who's really good. I also just think that this is maybe a way for the Hawks, if you think about it. If part of the Dejounte Murray trade conversation came out of a place of, we have to pivot here in some way, this is the cleanest way to do it, and then for whatever reason the market didn't break that way for them vis-a-vis Lakers trades or whomever else, this is a bigger, bolder way to do so, and it's a little more painful, it's a little more drastic, it's the very
but
least
this isn't a pivot, this is a reset.
Yeah.
This is tearing it down. Like, you don't have a team anymore if you trade Trae Young. You are the Hornets who we just started the show with.
You're the Hornets with a really good coach who is probably going to, like, that's probably the interesting part of this to me, is based on everything we know about how Quinn Snyder, this is really, really should have led with him, if I'm being honest. Based on everything we know about how Quinn Snyder ended up in Atlanta, it wouldn't shock me if, it would be surprising to me if he wasn't giving his opinion on this and saying, like, I'm maybe not a Trae guy. That's speculation, to be clear, but, like, I don't know if you get here, because when you read the reporting, it doesn't read so much to me as they are, like, Trae is unhappy. It's more of
No.
like the Hawks maybe want to move on from Trae. It's not star player X is unhappy with X team. It is more the team maybe wants to move off of the star player, which is interesting as far as the structure of this goes.
Yeah, and to me, Trae Young is not the main thing wrong with Atlanta.
No.
On the court. He's kind of doing his job. They're not a good team right now, but he is ninth. They are ninth in offense, and that is largely because of him. They also play a lot of one-way players around him, so of course that helps. But they are 27th in defense, and they don't really make sense in terms of how they're built. I think Clint Capella breaking down and really just impact-wise falling off a cliff is, to me, the biggest reason that their defense isn't even passable. But the DeAndre Hunter pick and development hasn't worked. There's all sorts of things you could point to. Trae Young, I still think if you did build correctly around him, could be a great player on a really good team. It might be a very specific build of what that looks like, but there's a lot of players you could say that about, and those teams aren't packing it up and quitting. So I guess my other thing, though, to talk about Quinn Snyder is, if you're asking me who I would rather pick to build around, between, even take the specifics of who it is out of it. Let's say a player as good as Trae or a coach as good as Quinn Snyder. I'm picking Trae 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, you should.
So it kind of doesn't really matter to me, with all due respect to Mr. Snyder and his lovely red glasses, what the hell he thinks. I don't care. I have a franchise cornerstone player, and I'm not parting ways with that unless the return is amazing, which I think maybe brings us to the teams here. San Antonio,
Spurs.
the Lakers, and the Magic seem to be the three that have come up in different places. I would think the Pelicans would be interested also, given that they were interested in Murray and we know they need a guard. So I'll throw them in there. That gives us 4 teams. I kind of just don't really think the Lakers have a competitive offer compared to some of these groups, but they're the Lakers, and this type of stuff falls into their lap. So
Also,
I would put them at the bottom. Who do you think
Also,
is the biggest?
clutch. Just
Exactly.
I'm just
and that's
saying-
part
I'm
of
just
why
saying,
it falls
yeah.
into their lap, right?
Just to
one
like
and the
put
same.
it in bold-faced type. Yeah, the fit I like the most for him would be Orlando. I think that's the best one for Trae the player.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Orlando or San Antonio that is the best one for Trae the player, because he would get defensive infrastructure provided to him, even if these teams give up a lot to get him. Like, look at what he would be around in Orlando. Look at what he would be around with Victor Wembanyama on his own and San Antonio. That is more than adequate, and those are both teams just dying out for ball handlers and passers at the level of Trae that can then cover up for a lot of his other flaws. Those are the two that I'm most interested in. You could convince me of New Orleans as well. The Lakers would be like a star talent play, but him and LeBron to me would be such a weird. Like, I can't exactly see them playing together. Like, it's just something weird about that combo to me, even if there's some passing synchronicity there and whatnot. But that would feel like a star play more than anything else. I think the best place for Trae would be San Antonio or Orlando, as far as how does he fit and how does he get a situation that isn't a different spin on the Atlantic coat of paint? How does he get a chance to evolve into the next phase of his career? I think those markets, those teams with those players would offer him the best case to do it.
The Spurs offer would be pretty great if it were to happen this, before the draft or on draft night, because they could offer this year's pick, which we don't know what it'll be yet, but very, very high, along with any number of their young players, which you might vary on how good you think they are. But yeah, obviously, if you're going to say one of the most defensively limited players in the NBA, who do you want to put him with? The best defensive player in the NBA whenever he gets into his prime, that's probably the guy you would pick. And even players like Vassell and Sohan, although Vassell, maybe more theoretical as a defender right now, Sohan's been very good on that end. You're starting to build the type of roster that I think makes a lot more sense for him, and they clearly need a point guard. This would be a huge way of solving that. I am of the opinion that they should be acting with more urgency because I think Vic will be, you want to be ahead of him being ready to win, not behind it. You don't want to have a full season go by where you say, damn, he was elite. Luka made an all-star team in year 2. I believe he made first team All-NBA in year 2, right? This stuff can be very quick and you got to be ready for it. So I would like to see that type of move for them. But I think the clutch part of it, to maybe tie a bow on any of this, is it might not be his decision yet, but I think we can both agree that if it gets to the point where there are actual discussions, it will very quickly become more controlled by him and that agency, because that tends to be how these things work. And so maybe that makes the Lakers more likely. Maybe we find out he says F that to going to live in San Antonio for the next few years. We never really know, but
I mean, it's funny. The San Antonio part is just funny in that case because there's a line in the Stein report that reads, quote, "It is likewise believed in some corners of the league that Young would have interest in South Texas as a destination if he were forced to leave Atlanta."
And that keeps coming up like that. This isn't the first time that connection has been made, and that really surprises me. I wouldn't want to live there. I know a lot of beat writers say that's the worst city in the league to travel to. And that's not even like shade on San Antonio. It's just like you could pick a lot of other places that are probably more appealing, but maybe it's just Victor.
Yeah. It's going to be fun, Brennan. The NBA never does not provide something like this. And like with this and then Paul George's extension stuff, I'm just like I'm ready for some weird.
And Cat, who we will talk about with Zion momentarily.
Yeah, I'm just like ready.
We already have a bunch of them in the fries are in the cooker. The timer's on. We just got to wait for the beep to come, and then there will be more stuff, more fireworks.
No, where the NBA is perpetually that meme of that guy who like has the heat on really high in his stove, and he throws something in the pot and he waits for it to explode. That's the NBA at all times. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, and you're right. It is.
Also, this was also thrown in the Stein thing, and we just want to put this there, kind of like we're putting this Trae thing out there, and then we'll have to come back to it at some point. He wrote this, quote, "I know of at least 2 teams on the NBA map that believe LeBron James would consider signing with them at far less than $51.4 million if Bronny James is on the roster. There might be more," end quote. We'll see if that's true, that LeBron's talking about that has changed over time. If I had to guess, Brendon, right now, the 2 teams that think that, can I give you my guesses?
Okay.
Cleveland and Golden State. If it's not the Lakers, it's those 2.
Yeah, it can't be any teams over the second apron because then you're talking about him taking a minimum, and he's not going to do that. So that's the other factor. Like we talked about this a couple weeks ago and we threw out the Suns and whatever else. The Suns can't do that. So you really are – the number has to be very, very small. And so 2 sounds like the right number, and those 2 teams, I would certainly believe it. I'm on record saying I hope Ronnie doesn't have to deal with that, but maybe there's no way of avoiding the media circus and all the attention that will be his first couple of years in the NBA, no matter if he plays with his dad or what city it's in. But yes, more so than Trae or Cat or PG, perhaps the greatest player of all time switching teams is going to be headline number 1 this NBA offseason for sure.